Hopefully this is working. I'll wait a couple of seconds till I see the preview moving. All right, there we go. Cool. I have it on echo mode, which is not so good when you are in P5Live because you want the code running all the time in case you change windows to turn off preview and all that. Hey, so welcome to another session of P5Live. Today what we're going to do is try something fancy. We're always trying out different things every week. This week I thought it would be fun to test out using some COCODING and let you out there play around and explore the space as well. So I'm going to play with my mouse and code for the mouse, specifically using the mouse X and mouse Y. And anyone out there who wants to can join in and have the thing mess with their mouse as well. We'll see if this works. I have low latency on ultra low and hope that the streaming and everything works fine. So I'm going to close this here window and go just to my COCODING session. I'm going to copy not clone the sketch. I'm going to copy the URL real quick and make sure it's in the chat so anyone who appears can technically join. And I'm going to hide that and just start doing some coding for the mouse. The very first thing I would do is an ellipse that follows my mouse X, mouse Y, and has like 50. So we can just draw anything out. And if this thing is working, then technically you can go join that link. I spam it out there in the chat. I hope it works, that it shows up in the description of the video. But technically you can click that link. I recommend using a Chromium browser, and then you can hang out in this space and you can draw with us. I mean, you'll draw on your screen. I'll be providing the code, which your mouse will control. We'll see if this works. So I'm going to do something else. I'm going to do a frame count modulo width, and then let me say height divided by 2 and 100, just to get something moving across the page. Maybe I make it move a little faster. And I will let the mouse kind of manipulate this thing to go a little bit up and down. So I'll say like, let Y equal a map. The mouse Y, which can go from 0 to height, and I'll tell it to go minus 200 to 200 plus Y. And now the thing that's streaming across the screen is controllable by the mouse. I'll turn off this first one, do a hard compile. So every once in a while, I'm also going to be clearing the screen, which might be annoying to some people, that they start to build a beautiful picture and then I add some new code and it ends up trashing what you had. But hopefully this thing will work. Maybe I let this thing get a little further, 300 by 300. And let's do a little bit of fading out. Some background 0.5. So it fades out nice and slow. All right, so what kinds of things do I want to do with the mouse? Yeah, specifically like mouse X and Y stuff. It's super fun to play with dist to check out the distance of your mouse to a thing. So I think I'll do something and say like let S equal the dist of, oh, I don't know where this thing is actually. So I'm going to give it an X and say let X equal that thing. And then we're going to take a dist of the X and Y and the mouse X and mouse Y, and this might get humongous. And it's not happy because I forgot a comma. And then I got to use it. S. There we go. Whoa, that's big. So let's say no fill and set the stroke. So the further away I am from this thing, the bigger it gets, the closer I get to it, the smaller. Which still never gets that small. Because it's really... because it's technically up along there, not quite sure. Yeah, because its height, it's here. That's not part of Y, so let me make that part of Y. There we go. So now if my mouse is right on it, it's this little tiny shape. As it goes further away, it's allowed to expand. No one is in the session. I don't know if people know, if they see the chat. Feel free to join. Whoops, that's not the link. That is the link. Experiment. We'll only know if this works if some of you join. But it's okay. I'll have fun playing with the mouse myself. Yeah, so what other kinds of things would I do with the mouse? Maybe I would use... maybe it's interesting just tracing like a simple line where my mouse is on top of this. This is just kind of warming up. Mouse X, mouse Y, P mouse X, P mouse Y. Because it's always interesting. That's like the simplest little drawer you could possibly have. It's nice with one line of code, maybe two to have a stroke. You can draw little Mac Paint programs. Okay, but maybe this thing should have a little bit of motion on its own. It'd be kind of nice to let that thing warble a little bit on its own, so I think I'm going to say it's this S plus like noise of frame count times something slow times 50. And maybe it needs to be even slower and bigger. Even slower. Even slower. Okay, so now this thing has like some life of its own. Because it's able to add a little bit of noise. Maybe I make it go a little bit faster. And now it's like you can play with this little line going there and throw it inside of whatever this thing is. And maybe I play with another ellipse that's kind of cautious of this other circle. Then make an ellipse that is fixed like in the center of the page, the upper half. Let's see what that thing looks like. There it is. And maybe it reacts in size to this thing getting close and far away from it. X and Y. So now this thing kind of fades in and out depending on if that circle is coming by it. But the circle is super dependent on where my mouse is, so maybe it's interesting to use to give them the same size. What happens if I do that? If instead of S, this thing is getting... yeah, maybe these values instead. Actually, it's probably good to duplicate this line so I can just override it and test something out. So we'll start it over. Hey, we have a portly rhinoceros in the room. All right, welcome. I hope it's working for your mouse to control this thing. We don't have a whole lot right now, but we have some interesting pulsing thing in the center. And these lines there, they're like just barely touching. That noise is making it almost touch. We can make them touch by moving the mouse up and down. Maybe it's interesting to give this this noise its own variable so both of them could react to it. I'll call it let n equal that noise. And this one here will be n. And then I'll use on this other one minus n. So exactly as big as one gets, the other one should get that minus amount so they really never touch. Except that the the mouse is still controlling it. So what I'm going to try doing, all right, we got another hey rai okapi. I'm going to turn off the mouse for this circle going by, because I think it could be nice just to let it do its thing. So we're going to say it's just going across the width, and they're just kind of reacting to each other, and let's do other stuff with our mouse. Something that's always fun with the mouse is to get some symmetry going. So I'll do like a width minus, and then I can draw interesting kind of liney forms. Maybe just for some extra symmetry, let's give yet another one of these things. Times 0.75 times 0.75. Whoops. So it'd almost be like a gatekeeping going through. Divided by 4. Divided by 4. Place these things offset. Okay. I think I will turn off the circles for a minute and just exploit these lines. So we're just going to play with having a couple mirrored lines in different directions. This one should probably be also width minus. That's giving us this special shading. There we go. I kind of like the shading, actually. It's not bad. Let's do a height minus. Actually, that shading is kind of nice. I bring it back. So we have this shading. Hopefully this is working for those out there playing along. Let's set the stroke weight to like 3, so it's a bit thicker. And let's do one more minus height. Whoops. Rather height minus. Yeah, I think with like these 4 lines, that's enough. I'm entertained to just play with weird symmetry of these things for a long time. It's probably interesting as well to have like a width minus just to play with some other dimensions of symmetry. Maybe it's nice that only some of these have that line connected. Maybe add another and give this one a width minus. So we start getting just some strange twisting and turning. And eventually what is not always nice to do is to start to track these things, like to leave actual traces where we are. So I think I will slowly transition. Something I'm going to do in the COCODING, whenever jamming with other people, it's good to clone your sketch every once in a while, just to click that little button so that you have a copy of the session saved for future reference. So let's start tracking these points. I just need one global variable. I'll call it chords. It's going to trash everything for a second. Yep, so it's an array. And then I'm going to do something like if chords dot length ever gets to be bigger than, let's just count 100 for now. Chords dot splice 01. So that's going to trash the oldest one, so they can start keeping track of all these positions. So I'm going to say, it could be when pressing the mouse, but I think I'm going to do it just with the plain old drawing. So I'm going to say chords dot push mouse X mouse Y. Rather create a vector that is mouse X and Y. And then I should turn most of these off just so that I can know if it's working. And I'm going to get rid of that top circle that I had and see if this thing is working. So for let's see in chords. What do I want? I want a, let's draw an ellipse where they are. C.X, C.Y, 10. Is it working? 50. Chords.push. Create vector X and Y. Maybe I should do it beforehand. Is it of instead of in? There it is, it's in, or of rather. Fun trick I just saw in a recent stream on Sunday. A little fun trick that Abe Homoid had done was to do a chords dot for each. I'm going to screw this up, so I probably shouldn't even do it. No, I'm totally going to screw it up because I don't practice arrow key commands enough. Is it something like this? No, it's not. I take it back. I wanted to play with a for each. Need to practice arrow commands. Instead, for now, that's my fun shorthand, is just to use this of. So let's turn off the line as well. So I just have these points to play with. Hopefully it's working for anyone else out there playing. I can clear the sketch manually, so that started it over. Every once in a while when you make a nice picture, before I clear the code, you can press Control S to save a screenshot of what's happening. But maybe it's interesting to throw some special values in here, like random 10 to 150, and then use that value, C.Z. That way these things have a random value, but maybe random isn't so nice. It'd be better to play with noise. Times 100, for example. So each of those things gets their own size, but even that might not be so nice. It might be nicer to just store a value and let the things animate on their own. So I think I will start all these things off actually at like 100. That doesn't look so big, I guess. Is that really 100? Nope, something's wrong. I lost a parenthesis. There we go. That's 200. And I think inside of here I'll say if C.Z is more than 0, C.Z minus minus. And that'll make all these things shrink on their own, which creates a pretty trippy effect, especially because of the background glow with the slight fade of the background. I think I could take away that stroke weight, which is making, it's kind of whiting out everything. Maybe even go thinner, 0.5. That makes an interesting kind of ghostly effect. We're drawing intestines right now. We can do some biological imagery here, or X-ray like maybe. Maybe let the thing start out even bigger so it can really fade down. And maybe they should fade at different rates, so it's not a constant speed. So minus equals random 1. Might end up looking random. What about random 3? Yeah, we have like a slinky vision. Kind of interesting to move the mouse really fast and make those things appear. I copy the link again in case anyone missed the chat who joined a bit later. Again, you can jump into the space. It's COCODING. I've locked the room because I'm a jerk. And you can use your mouse while I'm coding to interact with all the things that we're making. Hopefully it's working out with low latency, that you hear my voice pretty close to when you see the image. I recommend using a Chromium browser some form of Chromium, maybe Firefox as well, but Chromium tends to be the smoothest for all this kind of stuff. So maybe it's interesting to let this store even more, bring that up to 200, and then I have even more of these things that I can hold on to. Ooh, I really like them when they're at that small stage just before they expire. Maybe that's interesting to exploit as well. To not make these things so big, let's start off at 100. Whoops. Actually, I take it back. I'm going to go back to where I was. Hey, we have another. Hey, welcome, eMusic. Welcome, Solid Gazelle. So yeah, every once in a while I'm going to clone the sketch. Feel free to do that too. Then you get to play with the stuff later. So I'm going to make these things now 100 and have them slow down way, or have them shrink way, way slower. So I'll say minus equals 0.1, which is too slow. And what about 0.5? Equally too slow, I think. But they make an interesting dot at the end. No, I think it has to be just the right speed that you get this cool tracing. Maybe it was about being a fast speed. And I guess when it's too regular, that's too regular. So actually random was good to let these things go at different speeds, and then you get those different patterns. Yeah, so I can draw and say hello there. I can also do some fancy stuff to those who are out there. I can broadcast my mouse. This will be kind of annoying. Take a picture if you're saving something. I'm going to broadcast my mouse, clear the screen, and say hello. And this should work on all of your screens, this crappy handwriting. But I'll give back the mouse. Yeah, there's just some fun stuff that you can do when demonstrating or just using like remote versions of COCODING to broadcast. Whoever started the room can do this broadcasting of their mouse. So it's kind of fun drawing these things out. It might be nice to let the things, maybe instead of making them just stop, I should actually let them continue to go in and out. So maybe I tell these things to be, should be like a sine wave, and get rid of this if statement. So as long as they're still hanging out, oh, there they go. Yeah, so that's going to go in the opposite direction, but I would put it in some kind of sine direction. So I would do something like, what do I want to do? The easy thing would be to start off at 0 and just use a sine wave, but we're going to say minus a sine of frame count times 0.1, for example, times 4. I'm going to need to get random in there. Okay. So now they're all kind of going back and forth too fast. 05 is a nicer speed, and now I need to get a counter in there so that everything can be at different speeds from each other. So in this fancy, easy version, there's no counter. So you have to invent it yourself. So I'm going to say, I'll just call it counter equals 0. And inside of here, I'll say counter plus plus. And then I can use an offset counter plus and make it like times 5. Did not work. Why did that not work? Counter plus plus. Ah, there we go. Just had to recompile. Once in a while, some code, if you type it too slow or something, can crash it, but that didn't work. Minus equals sign. Probably because it should be just like equals. But that takes too long. What happens if these things start out at 0 and I let it go faster? Because, no, let me go back. This will have to be like times 1 maybe, because it's minus. There we go. But then they kind of stop wiggling. No, they just become expired. So what if I get rid of the fading altogether and we just see the ones that we have? That's what it looks like. which is kind of interesting, but then you get that chasing tail and they're not really moving and they totally stopped moving. Why did they stop moving? Because I think they're just going too far in a negative direction, maybe. Because if I said plus, they eventually just kind of break down. Strange. Maybe because the counter constantly starts over. I have no idea. What should I do? Let me try a normal kind of loop. No, this is always 0. What if I do the opposite? What if I said counter dot length? Not counter, rather chords. Counter goes minus minus. Nope, but we have like a nice like wiggle vision. They're kind of freaking out. All right, I'll go back to 0. Yeah, I have a feeling it's something about this telling them to be 100 and then go down. So I'm going to say, let's just start out at 10 so that there is a dot. And then instead of this plus minus, I'm just going to say equals this thing times 100. And I'll slow it down. Actually has to be slowed way down. Interesting. No. It was, there we go. There we go. I think that's what I was after. No, and then they freak out. Interesting. Yeah, it looks like they freak out the minute this buffer kind of runs out. So I have to figure out to do something different there. I wonder if it's about this splice, the fact I'm splicing. The fact I'm splicing from them. Weird. If I do a hard compile on everyone, there it's all nice and smooth until that happens. I feel like I've run into this before. And I don't quite, maybe it's because of this frame count. It might be because this frame count is such a high number when they all join later. So I'm going to try inventing our own frame count. FC equals 0. And inside of here, I'm going to say FC plus plus, see if this makes any difference. But that should probably be the exact same thing. Okay, it's like they're rapidly getting faster and faster. Interesting. It's working a bit different than when it's in a normal loop. And if I get rid of the counter, cut. Okay, then they all have this pulse. Okay, it's something about using this this counter in there. Interesting. Maybe with a different style of looping, you don't run into that issue. So that's going like so, which is actually also going really fast. I'm kind of surprised how fast they are pulsing. Okay, let me try looping through these things the normal way. I is less than chords.length, I plus plus. And then let's go grab each of those things. I'll say let C equal chords I. And I'll draw an ellipse where it is. And I'll turn this thing off. All right, so there's just that boring little circle. And now let's tweak the Z. C dot Z equals this sine. We can use our own frame count. It shouldn't have to be such a small number, times 100. And maybe what the problem is it's not actually affecting the Z value up the stream. So maybe I need to do it like so. Interesting. Huh. Super strange. No idea what's going on with this splice. If I go C dot Z equals random 10 to 100. Alright, then they freak out. So what was wrong with the sine wave? The sine wave was broken because I was never adding to FC. Damn it, I turned it off down here. Let's change this to a normal frame count and try it out again. Okay, that looks normal. And let's get I in there. All right, now it's doing what I expected, I believe. Or is it? There we go. Yeah, super strange. Huh. Something happens through this formulation, this let C of chords, that isn't affecting the object in the same way or doing it in a super different way. Not quite sure what's happening. So we can trash all of that. Yeah, and now we're playing with like fun wobbly orby things. I'll bring this back up to 200 and let this thing get much bigger, like 200, and slow it down. And now we have these fun kind of like, almost like, I don't know, orby thingies. Almost like a weird little sausage links, but abstract. And they're still going super fast, so I'm surprised, but I'll make it even slower and see what that does. Yeah, but we have this fun kind of like catch up to the different spots because we're storing enough of them, so you can sort of let it sit for a little bit at one spot and let it collect in that region. I will clone this once. Get rid of these lines. We don't need all these lines that we had before. Although, mouse X, mouse Y, P mouse X, P mouse Y. It could be nice to have a single one of them. Well, I turn the background back on for a minute. Whoa, way too much. Now this line doesn't do anything. This will be a nice test of the compression algorithm to see how well it can handle all these little shapes. I bet it would be all pixelated like. These things are still moving way fast. I'm surprised it's going so fast. Let me make this even slower. It's more about the speed at which all of these things are like running into the next one. If I make this some other number, that's just about the sort of the size of these little sine wave guys. If I let them get even bigger, like 300, 500. Can start to make it look like something in motion, some kind of locomotion. Yeah, because of this collecting of the points, it starts to look like this motion phone. A drawing interactive app from quite a few years ago that got remade for the iPad not so long ago. I believe Scott Snibbe Studios. But it's super fun playing with these coordinates, holding on to where we are, where we were with the mouse, and being able to play with that spot. This thing is still going crazy fast. I wonder if I can get this thing to... I'm kind of wondering why it is moving so quickly through those different shapes. But it might just be a aspect of... No, what is happening? I wonder if it's about a push and pop. I don't think so. Well, I'm technically not using any of that code. Let me turn that stuff off. And maybe instead of playing with these circular patterns that we see through, it can also be nice to do some pulsing between the fill of what each of these things are. So I'm going to do a fill, fill 255, and then say if I modulo 2 equals 0, every other one, fill black. And I'll tidy it. Well, technically I should surround this so I don't forget what was happening earlier. And I'm going to turn off the stroke weight. No stroke. And it's interesting because of this sign, we get this interesting kind of like linking between them where they really look like they're connected to each other. Wow, we get a pretty wild, kind of like a roar pneumatic tube. It can also be nice to turn off the cursor. Control C hides the cursor so that you just have the drawing itself. It's running really fast through each of those shapes. I think I'm doing something kind of weird. It might be because I'm trashing the... No, I'm not trashing the front one. I'm trashing the back one. Maybe it's if I told it to go even not so often. But then I'm afraid it would just look kind of jumpy. But let's try this out. I'm going to say we're only going to hold on to 50 of them. And sorry, I had to start it over. So now it's just 50. But I'm going to say if frame count modulo 3 equals 0 and. Nah, that just gives us a interesting but not desired kind of like slow down effect. But it is kind of interesting. I hope that's not epileptic setting. But the advantage is now we can draw a way crazier, wilder form. And take a little picture of that. Yeah, I hope you're having fun drawing out there. And I'm going to, the speed of it annoys me a little bit. I'm going to make it go a little bit faster every other frame. Yeah, we probably should be careful how many times we say Beetlejuice out there. Might show up in our browser. And I'm going to turn off the background altogether and see what happens with this, just kind of leaving those traces behind. And maybe going back to 1. So it's like a really fast catch up. Although it feels like it's leaving a whole lot of these things behind. I feel like there's way more than 50 out there. Oh, I hope I didn't just ruin it for people when I recompiled mine. Yeah, if it doesn't seem like it's catching up to the code like what I see, then just press Control Enter. You can always press Control E to hide the code. So we could make some kind of freaky like salami thing if this just had the right colors. I could like draw around the page. Let's try it out. Instead of that, let's do random 255 00. It leaves a nice outline on the edge of it. And what happens if I slow this down so we get a different kind of orb? Oh, it'd be interesting if I wonder if it makes a difference if this is an odd number here. I'm going to reset it once. If it keeps it a bit more stable, maybe. I think so. Now it's like the stripes stay consistent versus if it's like so, then I think the stripes go through it. Is that right? Maybe. Can't quite tell. I'll let the thing get bigger. Actually, I want a higher number. Maybe this needs to be the higher number. Yeah, what's it like if I quickly take two of these things and do this oppositeness with minus. So then we get to play with symmetry of these things. Maybe I make this black instead of white. So we just see the color, or maybe it's a different color. Maybe I need to go into hue saturation mode. Let's try that. Color mode HSB 100. Ooh, it looks hypnotic if you weren't hypnotized. We lost our color for a minute. Let's bring it back. 100, 100, 100. Bring this one as well, which should be some other number like 50. You can create some pretty trippy patterns there. That may not be so nice if hopefully no one is afflicted by epilepsy, or the static images around it make it okay. What could be nice is to do, this is going positive to minus, so make this thing be like 300 plus. Or 100 plus. I think there's still something funny about this sine wave that we have here. It's acting quite a bit different than I imagined. Just go through the different numbers and see what these things do. Ah, that's a nice, oh, that's fun. Yeah, when you had just the right amount between them, then it really affects what shape they're making. I guess if I move fast enough, then I can see what that shape is. But if I move slow, then we just get these funny splotches of color. Maybe I turn on the background for a minute so that we can see what we're drawing. So I'll draw some shape and take a picture of this abstraction. And turn the background back on. That's with a fade. Let's turn off the fade altogether just to see what that's like. Yeah, so this is what we're drawing. Wow, they look really jelly-like. Pretty fun to make these things catch their own tail. I'm amused. Hope you are. Blurp, blurp. Yeah, maybe I let this thing go even more, see if the computer can hang with 151 of them. Then we have even more space to play with them. Turn the cursor on and off to make sure it's off. And it gets these really interesting kind of faux 3D qualities to it. I think I'm often seen like a Robert Crumb kind of character in there. Yep, and I think it's time to let the colors do some wandering. They don't need to be on the exact same color palette the whole time. Let's see, let's let some number wander. Maybe it's interesting to let one of the values be like I modulo 100 if we want the full color spectrum in there. Which did, not times 100, modulo 100. There we go. Then we get almost like a heat camera. And maybe I do the opposite for the other one so we get this kind of inverse effect. Maybe you can hear my mouse doing little swirly actions. Yeah, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty amused just playing with this for the rest of the time. I'm going to clone the sketch to make sure I don't lose this thing. And what else should I do with it? Maybe I should quickly play with the other modes of. I'm going to make fewer of them so that I can duplicate some. There we go. We're back down to just 50 and play with the other modes of symmetry. So let's get height minus in there. And copy paste that one more time without that one. Now we have cheap kaleidoscope. Can test out what it looks like once with strokes, but I'm sure it's much better as a fill. Stroke, stroke, and no fill. So much different. Wow. Yeah, it loses all of that kind of mysteriousness in the forms. Although you do get some interesting colors happening in the center there, it's worth scaling this up so that we could see zooming in there. Probably not worth scaling, maybe just about having a thicker stroke. Yeah, this is totally not going to work on the compression. I'm sure this just looks like scrambled pixels, but hopefully they look like interesting scrambled pixels. And now, because we've been seeing what this look like with the background, I have to turn off the background, and you are hypnotized. This is trippy vision. So let's turn off the background for a minute and see what this thing looks like traced out. Yeah, it can really create some kaleidoscopes in the center there when you run in the middle and do a bunch of stuff and then run away from it. I hope the others hanging out in the space are taking some pictures. Control S hopefully works on your computer. Would be really nice to see later what kinds of things other people made just playing with the exact same sketch but with a different mouse. Because of course I'm running my mouse in a particular way with this thing. Okay, but I'm going to switch this back to fill. I think fill was a lot more fun than stroke. But it might be interesting to have the best of both. What is it like using one and the other? There you can have an outline. Or the opposite. What effect does that make if we do a stroke and then a fill? Pretty similar, except it's just smoother at the very front because then there's no stroke. Yeah, maybe it's interesting to turn off one of these. Which one? I think this one. And then you can have like weird caterpillar vision. Not that this has to look like anything, but it is fun to free associate with your code. And this is oh so colorful, which is fun. But let's check out some grayscale. So hue, saturation, let's put the saturation down to 0. And I guess one of them needs to have its brightness lowered. Maybe the other way around. But maybe... Nope, let's get rid of that. 0. Hue, saturation, and brightness. So if I go back to 0, interesting, I just have to move this value over there. So this doesn't matter, and we use this then for the brightness. There we go. That also looks interesting. These things just kind of like oozing on top of each other. You know what? Yeah, that's interesting. That they're starting out at the beginning. Even the front ones are also doing this sine orbing. It might be nice to have. I'm not sure. To mess with the sine wave as it's being built. Let me quickly throw this number into the stroke as well. Well, it gets a little slow sometimes if the code is being clicked on. Yeah, I'm going to try one more time this, let me save this grayscale version of it. One more time, I'm going to plant the value into it. So I'm going to say like a sine wave of frame count times 0.5 times 100 is the value that comes into it. And then I'm going to turn off this thing. And actually we were up to like 300 and just have to slow this thing way down. 01. Yeah, it's not as fun as the other, but then I want to bring back that sine wave in a way. I want to test out this c.z plus equals a sine value of frame count times some fraction of itself times 1, I guess. Whoa. Interesting. That creates this almost meta ball-like shading. Trippy. Interesting polarization effect. Build a fancy mustache generator. Yeah, trippy. We've landed on some nice 90s graphic aesthetics, maybe early 2000s. Needs more bevel. But wild to see that generated on the fly. What happens if I do ×2? Do these things get bigger or smaller? Interesting. If I go 3, I think we'll somehow be going back to something that we maybe saw at the beginning. That's a nice kind of surprising size that's been introduced. Let's turn on all the mirroring. We can make some nice Rorschach tests, and you can analyze yourself. What do you see in these things? Some psychoanalysis in our creative coding. And maybe this size should actually be using distance like we wanted to from the beginning. So I'm going to say times the distance. Let me make a new variable and say let d equal the dist of my mouse x to the center of the page. And then it'll be nice and big on the outside and small on the inside. Maybe helps fill up the canvas. Wow, we get some nice, very abstract animation happening by letting it get so big out at the edges. Yeah, it's all about timing of when do you run the mouse out to the outside based on this sine wave. Quite trippy fadings. They start to look a little bit like these meta ball kind of Morby shapes. And let's test our processor by just like letting a whole lot of these things collect. We're doing 4 of them, so I'll do 101. That way even more of these things can collect, and I'll test out letting the sine wave change more frequently so it gets bigger and smaller quicker. And maybe one last time I'll test what it's like with just D instead of the sine wave. So then it's just based on how close or far you are from the center. Yep, that makes a smoother animation, but less surprise. So I'm going to bring this frame count back in there at some random value. And try it once super slow. So this thing is just like fading in and out. You are being hypnotized. Hey, thanks for tuning in to this week's P5Live session. We have a fun surprise for you next week. I'm not going to say anything about it, but we're going to do something completely different. It will be improvised, but I know in what way we're going to improvise. So hope you can tune in next week, synchronized or asynchronized. And thanks for tuning in. See you next time.